A shocking reincarnation story, the boy who remembered his past life in World War II. Do you believe in reincarnation? The idea that we've all lived past lives before this one? Have you ever wondered, who were you before? A soldier? A traveler? Someone from a different time and place? Reincarnation is the belief that after death, the soul is reborn into a new body, carrying memories, emotions, and experiences from a past life. Found in many cultures and religions, it remains one of life's greatest mysteries. But what happens when a child starts remembering a past life in shocking detail? This is Liam. Welcome to my channel. James Leininger was just 2 years old when the nightmares began. Violent, gut-wrenching screams tore through the quiet of the night. His parents, Andrea and Bruce Leininger, would rush to his side, only to find their little boy thrashing in bed, terror written across his tiny face. "Airplane crash!" he would cry out. "Little man can't get out!" At first, his parents thought it was just a phase, normal childhood fears, perhaps triggered by something he saw on TV. But the nightmares didn't stop. They became more vivid, more detailed. James would wake up sobbing, kicking as if trying to escape from something unseen. And then he started remembering. He would talk about planes, specific types of aircraft that a 2-year-old should have no knowledge of. He spoke of battle, of enemy fire, of being trapped in a cockpit engulfed in flames. Andrea was unsettled, but Bruce, a former skeptic, dismissed it. How could a toddler possibly remember something from another lifetime? But the details James shared were not just the ramblings of a child. They were eerily precise. He said he flew a plane called a Corsair. He said it took off from a ship named the Natoma Bay. He even mentioned the name of a fellow pilot, Jack Larson. His parents were dumbfounded. How could James know these names, these places, these events? Bruce, still skeptical, decided to investigate. He searched military records, trying to prove to himself that his son's words were nothing more than coincidence. But what he found shook him to his core. The USS Natoma Bay was real, a small aircraft carrier that fought in the Pacific during World War II. Jack Larson was real too, a fighter pilot who had served aboard that very ship. And then, the final piece fell into place. A pilot named James Houston Jr. had been killed in action, shot down over Iwo Jima in 1945. James Leininger had just turned 3 years old, and he had already remembered his past life. That was only the beginning. In the coming years, James would reveal even more details. Was this just an extraordinary case of childhood imagination? Or was it proof that the soul never truly dies? This is the story of James Leininger. And it might just change everything you believe about life, death, and what comes after. Chapter 1. The Nightmares Begin. The nightmares came like clockwork. Almost every night, James would jolt awake, drenched in sweat, his tiny hands gripping his bed sheets. The screams echoed through the house, shaking his parents to their core. "Airplane on fire!" he sobbed. "Little man can't get out!" Andrea and Bruce did everything they could to comfort him. But nothing helped. The dreams kept coming, relentless and terrifying. James's small body would tremble as he cried, his voice thick with fear. And then the drawings began. At just 2 years old, James started sketching crude images of airplanes, fighter planes, all with smoke and flames pouring from them. His mother would ask him about the pictures, and his answers were always the same. "This is my plane," he said, tapping his tiny finger against the burning wreckage. "It got shot down." Andrea felt a chill creep down her spine. How could a child so young understand such things? Where was he getting these images? They rarely watched war documentaries, and James was far too little to grasp the concept of death, let alone aerial combat. Bruce, a logical and no-nonsense father, tried to find a rational explanation. Maybe James had seen something on TV, something he wasn't supposed to. Maybe he was just an imaginative boy who happened to fixate on airplanes. But then, James started naming things. "It was a Corsair," he said one evening while playing with a toy plane. Bruce froze. That wasn't a word a toddler should know. Corsairs were fighter planes used during World War II, specifically in the Pacific Theater. And yet, James had said it so naturally, as if he had flown one himself. As the weeks passed, more details trickled out, pieces of a puzzle that shouldn't have existed in a little boy's mind. He spoke of aircraft carriers, of missions over the ocean, of enemies in the sky. And every time he woke up screaming, his words were the same. Little man can't get out. The nightmares weren't stopping. If anything, they were getting worse. And soon, Andrea and Bruce would realize their son's words weren't just a child's imagination. They were memories from another life. Chapter 2. A toddler's shocking knowledge. James's parents began to notice other strange things. He would sit for hours, staring at pictures of fighter planes and books, flipping through pages like he was searching for something familiar. If his mother pointed to an aircraft and asked what it was, he would answer without hesitation. That's a Corsair. It had problems with the tires. Bruce, now growing uneasy, researched the claim and found it was true. The Corsair, known for its speed and power, did indeed have landing gear issues. But how could a toddler possibly know that? James also began correcting his father on war history. One night, Bruce casually referred to a plane's external fuel tank as a bomb. James shook his head. "No, Daddy, that's a drop tank." Bruce was stunned. The term drop tank was a technical phrase used by military pilots. James had never been exposed to such jargon, yet he spoke as if he had first-hand experience. The more they listened, the more details James shared. He spoke about battles in the Pacific, about being stationed on a ship called the Natoma Bay, about a friend named Jack Larson. Determined to prove his son wrong, Bruce dug into military archives. But every name, every place, every detail James had given them was real. The USS Natoma Bay had been an aircraft carrier active in World War II. Jack Larson had been a fighter pilot on that very ship. The shock hit Bruce like a tidal wave. His son wasn't making this up. Somehow, impossibly, James Leininger knew things that only a World War II pilot would know, and that was just the beginning. Chapter 3. Meeting the Past. Bruce and Andrea were no longer just parents to a boy with an unusual fascination. They were investigators in a story that seemed too incredible to be real. Determined to get answers, they tracked down Jack Larson, the pilot James had mentioned. To their astonishment, Jack was still alive. When they spoke to him, Jack confirmed everything. He had served with James Houston, Jr. He remembered the day Huston's plane was shot down. The details James had described, the dogfight, the fiery crash, were all true. But Jack had even more to say. He recalled how James Houston, Jr. was a fearless pilot, always eager to take on challenging missions. He wasn't just another guy in the squadron, Jack told them. He was one of the best. Bruce and Andrea, still grappling with the implications, pressed Jack further. Could he verify any of the personal details James had spoken of? Jack hesitated, then nodded. James had talked about a particular aircraft malfunction that few outside their group knew about, a jammed control stick, right before his plane went down. "We always wondered if that's what did him in," Jack admitted. He was yelling about it over the radio. The Leiningers were floored. Their son had recalled things no living person had told him, but the real test was yet to come. Andrea reached out to the one person who might hold even more answers, James Houston Jr.'s only surviving family member, his sister, Ann Houston Barron. What she would reveal next would send chills down their spines. Chapter 4. A Sister's Confirmation. Andrea reached out to the one person who might hold even more answers, James Houston Jr.'s only surviving family member, his sister, Ann Houston Barron. When Ann agreed to speak with them, she had no idea what to expect. But from the moment she met young James, something about him unsettled her. There was a familiarity in his presence, a strange connection she couldn't explain. Sitting down with the Leiningers, Ann was skeptical. She had spent decades mourning her brother, and never imagined she would hear his name in this kind of conversation. But as soon as James started speaking, all doubt began to fade. Without hesitation, James looked at her and said, "I've missed you, Annie." Ann's breath caught in her throat. Her brother had been the only person who ever called her Annie. No one else, not friends, not family, had used that nickname. She blinked back tears as she listened to the small boy before her. Then, James began recounting memories only James Houston Jr. could have known. He spoke about their childhood home, describing a white house with green shutters. He mentioned their father, how strict he had been, and the dog they had once owned. But what truly stunned Anne was when James described a locked wooden chest in their attic, a place where James Houston Jr. had kept his personal belongings before going to war. Shaken, Anne confirmed that such a chest existed. No one outside her family could have known about it. As their conversation continued, James brought up a small, intimate detail, how their mother used to sing to James Houston Jr. before bed the same lullaby every night. When he hummed the tune, Anne covered her mouth in shock. By the time the meeting ended, Anne was no longer skeptical. Tears streamed down her face as she held James's small hands in hers. "I don't understand how this is possible," she whispered. "But my brother is still here." For Anne Houston Barron, there was no more doubt. The soul of her brother had found its way back, through the body of a young boy named James Leininger. Chapter 5. The Proof. No one could deny, as incredible as James's memories were, Bruce and Andrea still struggled with doubt. Could it all be an astonishing coincidence? Were they unconsciously leading him toward these details? They needed undeniable proof, something that could silence even the harshest skeptics. That proof came in the form of James's own handwriting. One evening, while flipping through a book about World War II aircraft, James suddenly picked up a crayon and with surprising precision wrote 3 words, James Houston Jr. Andrea gasped. James had never seen that name written before. They had been careful not to mention it around him, and yet his tiny hand had scrawled it with certainty, as if he had signed it 1,000 times before. Bruce took the paper and compared it to an old military document they had obtained, one that contained the actual signature of James Houston Jr. The resemblance was uncanny. The handwriting, though written by a child, carried the same distinct slant, the same loops and angles. It was chilling. James then said something even more stunning. "I had another plane before the Corsair. It was a Wildcat." Bruce, who had now become obsessed with verifying his son's claims, immediately went to his research. And sure enough, James Houston Jr. had flown a Wildcat before transitioning to the Corsair. The Leiningers could no longer deny what was happening. Their son wasn't making things up. He wasn't recalling facts he had overheard. He was remembering. And for the first time, Bruce, the once skeptical father, whispered words that changed everything. "I think my son has lived before." James's memories weren't fading. They were growing stronger. And what they would uncover next would shake the very foundation of what they believed about life and death. Chapter 6. Seeking the Experts. With overwhelming evidence in front of them, Andrea and Bruce knew they couldn't ignore what was happening, but they needed guidance, someone who could help them understand what their son was experiencing. That's when they turned to Dr. Jim Tucker, a psychiatrist specializing in past life memories in children. Dr. Tucker had spent years studying cases like James's, carefully documenting children who recalled lives they had never lived. When the Leiningers contacted him, he was immediately intrigued. After reviewing James's statements, drawings, and the confirmed historical facts, Dr. Tucker agreed to meet them.
Well, I think what the research shows is that for people who are open to considering the possibility that there is evidence that consciousness at times can exist separately from a functioning brain. So in the cases of these children's reports, if you look at the best cases, they provide evidence that at times there can be this carryover of memories and emotions that seem carried over from one life and continue on in another.
Sitting across from James, the doctor observed him closely. Unlike other cases, where memories were often vague or inconsistent, James spoke with clarity and confidence. "What happened to your plane, James?" Dr. Tucker asked gently. James didn't hesitate. "It got shot down. It caught fire, and I couldn't get out." Dr. Tucker nodded, taking notes. "Do you remember anything after that?" James was quiet for a moment. Then, in a small voice, he said, "I floated up. I watched it go into the water. And then I came here." Andrea shivered. She had heard of near-death experiences, but hearing it from her son was something else entirely. Dr. Tucker explained that many children who remember past lives tend to lose their memories by the age of 7. It's as if the connection to their past fades as they become more grounded in their current life, he said. Bruce, still struggling with his belief, asked, "So you think James really was James Houston Jr.?" Dr. Tucker leaned forward. "There's no doubt that what James has described aligns with an actual person, down to the smallest details. While science may not fully explain how this happens, his case is one of the strongest I've ever encountered." Andrea and Bruce exchanged a glance. They had come looking for answers, and they had found them. But the biggest question remained, what did this mean for their son's future? As James grew older, would he forget, or would his past continue to follow him? Chapter 7. The Fading Memories. As James grew older, his memories of his past life began to change. The vivid nightmares that had once plagued him became less frequent. The details of his time as James Houston Jr. started to blur, as if they were slowly slipping away. Andrea and Bruce watched this transformation with mixed emotions. On one hand, they were relieved that their son was no longer tormented by terrifying visions. On the other, they wondered, was he losing an essential part of who he had once been? Dr. Tucker had warned them about this possibility. Many children with past life memories begin forgetting them around the age of 7 as they become more grounded in their current lives. And now, it was happening to James. One night, Andrea sat beside her son and gently asked, "James, do you still remember flying the Corsair?" James frowned, as if struggling to grasp something just out of reach. "A little," he admitted, "but it's like a dream. I can't remember when I wake up." Bruce, who had once been skeptical of everything, felt a pang of sadness. The undeniable proof they had witnessed, the names, the places, the handwriting, was now becoming a distant echo in their son's mind. Still, there were moments when glimpses of his past would resurface. Once, while visiting a military museum, James paused in front of a War II aircraft and whispered, "That's just like the one I flew." Andrea and Bruce exchanged a knowing look. The memories might have been fading, but deep down, some part of James still carried them. Chapter 8. A Life Moving Forward. As time went on, James's life took on a new normal. The nightmares had ceased, and his obsession with planes had lessened. He still loved aviation, but now as a hobby rather than an unexplainable fixation. His parents, forever changed by their journey, made peace with the fact that James was moving on. They no longer needed to prove anything to themselves or anyone else. They had seen enough to know that reincarnation was real, even if their son was beginning to forget. James grew into a thoughtful and intelligent young man, excelling in school and developing new interests. But every now and then, when he saw a documentary about what a Wida 2 or visited an air show, a flicker of something familiar would cross his face. A moment of quiet recognition. One day, as they were watching an old black and white war film, Andrea turned to James and asked, "Do you ever wonder about who you were?" James thought for a moment, then smiled. "I think I was someone who loved to fly," he said simply. "And I think he still does." Andrea hugged her son, realizing that whether or not he remembered his past life, it had shaped the person he had become. And in a way, James Houston Jr. would always be a part of him. As James moved forward, so did his family. They no longer searched for answers. They had already found them. And even though the memories had faded, the truth remained. Some stories never truly end. Do you think reincarnation is real? James Leininger's story remains one of the most compelling cases of reincarnation ever recorded. It challenges what we think we know about life, death, and what might come after. Was James Houston Jr.'s soul truly reborn? And if so, what does that mean for all of us? If reincarnation is real, how many lives have we lived before this one? Who were we? What lessons have we carried across lifetimes without even realizing it? Perhaps James's story is more than just a mystery. Perhaps it's a reminder that our pasts, no matter how distant, never truly leave us. What do you think? Could this be real proof of reincarnation? Or is there another explanation? Have you or someone you know ever had memories of a past life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more incredible mysteries. The more we explore, the closer we get to uncovering the truth. This is Liam, and I'll see you next time.